What's up, guys? Welcome back to the show. What Are You Made Of podcast with Mike C-Roc. Thank you for joining us again today. Thank you for all of your support. So anyway, today, guys, I brought on a friend of mine that I met through the 10X movement and a 10X mentor program, Todd Ault. He's the chairman, CEO, and founder of Ault & Company, Inc. Ault & Company is a private, diversified holding company acquiring undervalued assets and disruptive technologies with a global impact, which we'll dig into a little bit here in a second. And there's some companies that they're holding on to here that one in particular I want to talk to Todd about. But Todd, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
So Todd, you're currently in New York, right?
Yeah, we have an office. I have an office in Newport Beach and one in Manhattan.
Okay. And how do you split your time?
About 1 week, a month in New York, and about 3 weeks in Newport Beach.
Okay. All right. Nice. I like New York. I'll have to catch you up there a week that I'm up there sometime and pop in and see and just shadow you if you don't mind.
No. Yeah, so, I have a crazy schedule.
Yeah, I bet, man. It's some questions I have regarding your schedule here in a second. But Todd, this show's all about is talking about what we're made of, our past experiences. I believe everyone has a story to tell. Most people don't share their story because they're scared, they're embarrassed by it, they're worried about what people think, or they severely underestimate the impact their story can have on millions of people. And so that being the basis of the show, Todd, what are you made of, bud?
Well, I was born out of wedlock. My mom never married my real father, never met my real father. I grew up in HUD housing. My mom was a single mom, got pregnant when she was 17, had me when she was 18, and I was born in 1969. If you know anything, remember that time, being a single mom out of wedlock wasn't a good thing. Even though the 60s were revolutionary, you still had parents that weren't supportive of that, grandparents of that. So my mom was a single mom and really kind of shaped my life. She took care of us, and I kind of had to help raise my mom, because think about, by the time I was 10, she was 28, and I was the firstborn. And so my mom not being married, she married a guy who didn't treat her well. She had a daughter who was my half-sister. But I never call her my half-sister, but just for argument's sake, technically she's my half-sister. And, my mom really had to take care of herself her whole life. She was one of 9 total kids, and living in a 2-bedroom house in Ohio. So it was a rough life for my mom, and then that sort of transferred over to being a little, I never knew it as being rough until I got into around seventh. I probably discovered that we were poor around 5th grade. Mm-hmm. When I went over to other people's houses and they had milk that didn't taste the same as mine and their Kool-Aid had sugar in it,
How many kids were there?
I learned that we were poor about 5th grade.
How many kids were there total?
My mom had 2, and then my mom married when I was 13, and he had 2.
Gotcha. Yep.
And he really is the guy who I consider my father. He adopted me when I was 13. But for those first 13 years, I was really on my own.
Right. I can relate to that, man. And the half sister, half brother, same thing. I call my brothers and sisters. There's 8 of us. I'm the oldest of 8. So wow. I can definitely relate to that. Never knew my parents together either. Wow. So I did have my dad in my life for a few years at least. But yeah, so I can relate to that, man. And where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, but I moved to Orange County, California when I was effectively 5. The man who my mom was married to for a short time was in the Navy, so we lived in Hawaii for a year, but I was like a little kid, so I don't really remember it. So my earliest memories after Ohio was I moved to California. Orange County was about 5 years old, and I pretty much lived there ever since. I just turned 50, so 45 years in Orange County, California, gotcha. with a brief stint in Santa Monica.
Gotcha. And so as you grew up and you started to notice that your family didn't have it that well as you were going to other friends' houses and things, how did that impact you? And as you got into your teen years and all, did your focus start to direct yourself to, look, I don't want to live like this the rest of my life. I want that. Or how did that affect you?
I was probably too much. I was highly motivated to not let the same thing happen to my kids. So I'll skip around a little bit. I didn't have kids till I was 28, even though I got married at 20. I waited 8 years to have kids because, you know, my mom's still alive, but when you grow up in a household that is a little bit abusive, that person can't handle but be a little bit abusive too. You kind of learn that. So my mom did the best she could. I don't make excuses for it, but, you know, it was a tough road for her being a single mom, and kind of took it out on me a little bit being the oldest. So, you know, I really wanted to, you know, get my kids through college without student loans, make sure I was a father that was always going to be there.
Yeah, but nah, man, that's powerful. Look, I got a lot of things. I'm writing a book right now called "What Are You Made Of," and it has a lot to do with my history. And it's basically a timeline. I would say like a memoir, but I'm not like famous or anything like that, like a president to have a memoir. But the point of it is to show people to go back through stages of their lives and point to things where they use for fuel, right? And one of the things that I could relate to, what you said, was having a young mother, and you're the oldest, and basically kind of having to help raise your mom. And it's so crazy because that hit me. I never thought about it that way, but I remember giving my mom advice as a young kid, man. And
she didn't understand that sharing with her son, you know, we don't have enough money to pay the rent. And back then the rent was $135. We lived in HUD housing, 1295 North Gilbert, apartment 85 in Fullerton, California.
wow.
She shared, you know, a lot with me. So it was a burden at 9 years old to know that you may not have rent money, you know. I can remember vividly as a kid, my uncle, her brother, living with us. He was supposed to pay rent, and he left her a check for $300, and I was supposed to collect it. And she said, she got him on the phone with me and said, "Hey, is the check there?" And I said, "Yeah, he gave me the check." I didn't realize he gave me the copy that said non-negotiable. So when my mom got home, he was gone, and the check was non-negotiable. And he, you know, he basically pulled a scam on my mom, my own uncle. Yeah. And my mom didn't have rent money, and it was like, she was all upset with me. I didn't know what non-negotiable meant. I was like 8 years old, you know?
Right.
So I had just made a decision that I was never going to be broke, you know, I worked and played football through high school, and had a chance to get scholarships for college, but I was so motivated to work. I kind of did two things when I was a kid. I was motivated to fly planes, so I worked and was able to afford to get private pilot's lessons when I was about 13 because of my dad. My mom married at 13. And so I flew planes, was in Civil Air Patrol, and I either wanted to be a pilot or work on Wall Street. And my first wife said to me when I was going into the military, she said, I said, "What do you think I should do, work on Wall Street or be a pilot?" And she said, "Why don't you work on Wall Street so you can afford your own plane?" And that decision was the day I made the decision to work on Wall Street.
Gotcha. And did you end up going to college?
Yeah, I went to college. I was a big believer in it. I went to college pretty much full time while I worked from 20 on. And then my first wife wanted to go to law school, so I pushed her and I kept working. And so my issue with college for me was that I had already been studying Wall Street since I was about 11. So by the time I was 20, I was pretty versed in it. And by the time I was like 22 in school, I was making 100 plus a year. You know, this is 20, 30 years ago. And I was still in college when I was 25, and I was probably making 150 plus. And then I went to run a hedge fund, and my income just went parabolic. There was no way, and so I never went back and finished, even though I went to Chapman and had a chance to go to great schools. And as a junior, I just never went back.
So what were you doing when you were making 100,000, 150,000 in your early 20s?
So I ran syndicate for Dean Witter out of the West Coast. I had a chance to work in New York, but my wife didn't want to live here. And so I worked as a broker, and I wanted to be an institutional stockbroker. So back then I worked for a firm called Dean Witter, which no one would know today, but they were used to be big. They're now part of Morgan Stanley.
Yep, I remember.
And I called them to get a job. I called them, 60 times until they hired me. In fact, the guy who hired me was a guy named Perryman DeBose, and he was in a little strip mall for Dean Witter. And he basically said to me, "You're not going to stop calling me till I hire you." I said, "No." And I said, "I'll work for free."
And how old were you then?
I was 20. "I'll work for free." He's like, "You can't work for free here." And he said, I said, well, give me minimum wage. It can't be a minimum wage stockbroker. So he put me on commission, or put me on salary for $2,100 a month. And I didn't care. You know, it didn't matter what it was, right? And I went to training, and this is an ominous sign. I went to training in the World Trade Center, and I was leaving 2 days before the first bombing of the World Trade Center, where they blew the thing up, you know, in the garage.
Yep.
And long story short, I went to work for Dean Witter. I loved it, and was the only person ahead of me. There's a class of 160 people. The only person ahead of me was a former broker from Merrill Lynch. I don't know how he got in the training program. And then me. And so I built a career, you know, basically being a broker, and then eventually started calling on institutions, and then eventually ran syndicate for Witter on the West Coast.
And real quick for my listeners, what does ran syndicate mean?
Okay, so if people would know what a REIT is, I was in charge of getting brokers to get their clients to buy REITs, take them public.
Right.
Irvine office properties, equity office properties, Masterich. The very first deal I did was, I can tell in retrospect, the very first deal I ever did was Irvine apartment communities. Donald Brennan was bringing it public. And I was the new kid in the office. And in the 70s, the REITs blew up. So I wondered why no one wanted the job, but I never paid attention to it. And in Orange County, the Irvine company is a big company. He's one of the richest men in the country. And they said, we need you to help raise money for this company, Irvine. And I'm like, okay, great. And so I went and saw brokers and said, you got to put money in. And we raised $687 million as a syndicate with all of us, not just me. All of us.
No, but that's.
And they said, dude, you're great at this. Here's another one. And within 2 years, every REIT that ever went public came across my desk. I mean, every single REIT. And so I was the REIT guy. I was just like pounded by more and more REITs, but those all did well. Vornado, all these wonderful properties did incredible. It was just the right timing. And so bringing companies public is what I did in the beginning.
So let me ask you a question. Raising money, when you were raising money for the REITs and as a syndicate, basically you just making phone calls and reaching out to people?
Yeah, I mean, I basically
what did it come down to?
I went to the sales guys and said, here's why I got to do this deal. And I'd do a small roadshow for them and do rent. Back then, you didn't have, you know, everything was a fax machine. I vaguely cannot remember when you got an email.
Right.
And I'm trying to think. I think I got a teletype back then. And maybe there was early stage emails. I remember I was stupid. I used to have Todd at AOL. I should never have given that up. So yeah, you would just communicate with the brokers, you know, give everyone a prospectus and get them and explain to the deal and have management conference calls and stuff like that and raise the capital and talk to people about raising money.
Now, when you're raising money, is there a lot of follow-up that goes along with it as well? Or is it a lot of times you just pick the right people and then there's not a lot of follow-up that has to happen?
Oh, no, I think there's a lot of follow-up. One of the things that you wanted to do was not only get them to participate in the IPO, but to encourage them to look at the company in the secondary market after it went public so they could add to their position to be supportive of the deal. Gotcha. So yeah, follow-up was important.
And then nowadays, how's it changed, obviously, with technology and also the fact of your reputation? It's made it quite a lot easier to raise money, for example, for Alzamend or whatever you're into now?
I don't have problems raising capital. I suffered some reputational damage in 2008 when the market blew up. And I also became, when I left that career to run an activist hedge fund. And so I took, when you go to take a company over this public, it's just more of you know, they used to call it, you know, activism, takeover stuff, kind of I'm not Carl Icahn, but the same kind of basic concept for small companies. Mm-hmm. You end up buying companies that you have to consolidate them, make them smaller, bigger, merge things together, and you end up people having to be let go and cut costs. And so you suffer some reputational damage. And I, in the 2008, stupidly got myself involved in a credit card processing company that did adult. And that was the worst decision I ever made, investing in that company. I mean, that was the single worst investment decision of my life. And I paid the price reputational wise for something that people on the internet just make up and say. In fact, when people used to tell me, oh yeah, that's not true on the web, I'm like, yeah, sure. But now I'm kind of a victim of that a little bit, you know, my own success or failure, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And so I've learned the hard way that people can just say whatever they want. And it's one of the reasons I'm so active on social media, because if you don't control your own medium, they'll control it for you.
I mean, look at Donald Trump. That's his expertise, right? I mean,
Right.
he has this Twitter account to override the media.
And there's a little bit of truth in stuff on the web about everybody, but there's more to the story. And what I found is the people that have time to have vitriol and hatred aren't really doing anything. So it's taught me a lesson over time that if you see the same person doing it, they're not creating anything. That's some of the stuff I got out of Grant, which was, don't hate, try to create. You can't hate and create at the same time. He's got a lot of slogans that are interesting.
Yeah.
But they have meaning, right? And you can't do both. And so it used to bother me, and now it doesn't bother me at all. I could care less what people say about it. I care about what my family thinks. I care about what my friends thinks. And I have more colleagues like you who I respect what you're doing than I do. I don't worry about what people think. I worry about my clients, making sure they're taken care of. Listen, not all deals go perfect, but the one thing that my clients know is that if a deal doesn't go perfect, I'll do everything I can to either help them on this deal or bring them to the next deal for success.
Right.
And that's why a lot of people have been with me for so long. I mean, a lot of the original people I have are still with me 30 years later.
Right. I mean, I looked at your website, and one of the videos that you had on there talked about risk, and you start the video off by very clearly saying any investment that you make, there's risk.
Yeah.
And the higher the risk, the higher the return.
People don't hear that though. You try to tell them that, and there's some risk you just can't predict. 2008 was one of those, events, they call it Black Swan, where I had never seen sort of the catastrophic implosion that took place there and how it affected me, and a word that I'll never forget. And I remind myself every day, called cross collateralization, where one asset, if you default, can make you default on other assets. And that single thing is the biggest lesson I learned then, and who your friends were.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's it, man. I got so many things to talk about what you just talked about there. First of all, I want to go back to the biggest mistake that you said, the biggest investment mistake. Can you look back on that now and with 2020 vision and think about like, oh, I should have saw that at that moment and I didn't? Or is it just kind of totally blindsided you and you really think that you would probably made the same decision?
I was disconnected with my investor base, that they would care. I had a lot of Jewish families that had invested with me, and when they saw on their statement the name of the company that was involved in credit card processing, they were mortified. I didn't think anyone cared. I kind of thought that type of business was really mainstream. I was there for the yield. The yield was, you were credit card processing making 12 to 18% on each swipe of the credit card, right? It was, to me, I looked at it as financial services, but they looked at it as something worse.
Right.
And then I also, and I don't want to bash anybody, so let me be careful how I say this. The people you were dealing with in that industry had their own issues. And so the thing that Warren Buffett talks about working with great management, and I try to focus now on not running any of the day-to-day companies. So I don't really run any of them. I hire CEOs to run them, and it's changed my life because I try hard. It's really difficult, but I try hard to find the best people to work with that I really can trust, because something's going to go wrong. And that issue is, can you be open and transparent and communicate effectively and really say what you want to say to the people you're working with? That, I think, is the hardest part. Is like, he talks about a business can have a really poor economics, and you can bring in a manager with a great reputation, and the poor economics will win out, right? You still want to surround yourself with the right management team. And so you gotta make sure that you really get people around you that you can have faith in. And it doesn't mean they blindly agree with you. I don't need people to be yes men. I literally think that that's actually a negative. 10, 15 years ago in my life, I had a bunch of people that told me yes all the time. Now I have people that challenge me, and it's welcome.
Yeah. I talk about that all the time, culture. And when you have a, good culture, solid culture, that's your foundation. And that has to do with the types of people that you have, because when that stuff happens in 2008 or things go awry, they're going to look out for the company and as a whole work together, like you said, transparently, rather than just worrying about themselves, stabbing people in the back and running. And then, so I've been through that. with
Yeah.
a mortgage company. And it's just, I learned my lesson and I'll never go back to that again. And also having people that are producers or doing well in the company. However, they're not the greatest people. They're not great for your culture, despite the income they may be bringing into the company, the revenue they may be coming into the company from them. A lot of times you don't realize how much they're holding you back, or the thing that could happen down the road when things go awry, and how much you can lose. But I'm with you on that. Did you ever have, like, you were a CEO of the company at some point before you were ready to hire other CEOs, right?
Yeah, and I was the CEO. I took over a company, bought a bunch of stock of a company called Franklin Capital on the American Stock Exchange, and I took it over. The management left. I became chairman and CEO, and eventually changed that name to Patient Safety Technologies, bought a company called Ciorrocco Medical, and ultimately ran that company for a few years before it was sold to Stryker. I left and the company was ultimately sold to Stryker, but I founded what you know as Patient Safety Technologies. And I was the CEO first and learned that I wasn't that great of a manager.
And so that's okay to admit, man. I mean, like sometimes, like even myself, like I got to think sometimes there's weaknesses that I have running our mortgage division with my partners. Sometimes like I have strengths that they don't have, but they may be better. See, we play good cop, bad cop a lot. And so like, you know, we're having a sales meeting and somebody's having a bad attitude, and I start to like, it really, really detracts from what I'm trying to do. So I start to get irritated. And then I have to have my guys calm me down, and then like they handle it like the good cop. But there's attitude wise or personality wise, and then also management strengths. So here's the thing: when I have an idea, there's visionaries and then there's implementers, and then some people are both. And what would you consider yourself, more of a visionary?
I'm a visionary for sure.
Yeah.
And I try to implement, and I get very frustrated. And there's a couple key people on my team that they say they quote speak Todd. And they know what that means. So they'll get ahead of me on implementation, and they'll say, we know what Todd wants. And so that's really been a change in focus for me, is that I'll become a visionary, and then people will help me execute that vision.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for right now, because I have some really great visions, and I'm an implementer too. I'll implement. I don't like to do it though.
Yeah, I'm not that good.
It's kind of a.
I can push people, but I'm not good at the detail.
Yeah. Now, so what's an average day look like for Todd? Is it a consistent from day to day or from week to week or throughout your day? Like what time you get up and then how you go about your day, or is it very great?
I would not recommend my schedule to anyone. I usually go to bed about midnight, and I'm usually up about probably 6.
Yeah.
Market opens at 6:30. Then I probably go back to bed for a half an hour, like some weird thing. I'm married to a beautiful girl, and would prefer to hang out in my comfortable bed for a little bit.
I like that.
The kids have got to go to school, and I have 2 14-year-olds, boy-girl twin. But I like to drive them to school. And then from that point on, they'll tell you, well, Dad's on the phone the whole time, so I don't know why he takes me to school. But they still feel like it's good to take them to school.
Yeah.
And then I'll pretty much be on the phone. I have an executive meeting every day with my executive team. There's an executive committee, which is myself, the vice chairman and CFO, and the general counsel at 10 o'clock almost every day. I mean, it's scheduled every day. And then I have a 10:45 with the guy who's head of operations after that 10 o'clock. And it's pretty much nonstop on the phone or in meetings all day long, meeting someone financing one of our projects, working on a closing of a transaction, working on financing. And we have a lot of portfolio companies, right? So we're financing Alzamend and the 2 drugs that we're hoping to get into patients. One's a vaccine and a treatment for Alzheimer's. There's 2 different drugs. Financing our material sciences business, which is MTX International, which is based in England, with manufacturing in Italy, and financing our lender. We're a California licensed lender, so we lend money out. And so it's nonstop. I could work nonstop. I mean, it's nonstop. I would not encourage. What I did today, before I saw you, I was a little off in my schedule, as you saw earlier. I got up at 7. I went to Jersey for a breakfast meeting. I came back to see you, but we were a little messed up in time. Then I did 2 other meetings before then, and then rushed here to get to see you to do this. And then tonight I'll meet with our law firm for dinner at Mastro's. And I end up spending a ton of time with lawyers. Really, I would argue that most of my time is spent with lawyers.
Have you figured them out yet? Whether they like really need to take as long as they do, or they're just trying to, they're trying to monetize?
No, I do a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and
I'm
you know,
just messing around. That's a joke in a way.
no, I know. I actually think about it myself, but I do a lot of transactions which require their expertise, whether it be financing. I just did and we just announced on Monday that we did a financing to take out the debt of BPW, and believe it or not, we had to argue with lawyers about getting people paid back because it will be confusing to people. But when you offer to pay someone back, but they have the right to convert into a public company on the New York Stock Exchange American, and they know you're going to pay them back, then they don't want to get paid back. They want stock. And so,
right.
but we had an investor that demanded that they all get paid back. And so I spent 2 weeks arguing with them until I got the last person to agree at 8:30 on Monday morning, Pacific time. And then we closed intraday. They halted the stock, and we announced that we had refinanced the business. So it's a lot of work, and then I try to relax for a little bit, but it's nonstop.
Now, do you ever feel like you get into some things and you have to rely on other people's knowledge because you just don't feel comfortable with some of the details of like the type of business maybe, or the type of transaction? Or
when it comes to running the business, like decisions on personnel or how to make a widget, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a chemist, I'm not any of those things. So I have to rely on people I trust, and we try to hire people that are a specialty, that are, are focused in that category. But when it comes to public company stuff or finance, I've been doing it for so long that, and I read so much Edgar filings, SEC filings and stuff like that, that I sort of guide my lawyers, or they guide me. I'm very versed in public finance, very versed.
Gotcha. And so the amount of things that you accomplish, what are some advice to people? What are your steps that you take to accomplish so many things and have so much on your plate? How do you keep organized? Do you write your goals down every day and every night, like Grant talks about?
I do write the goals down. I'm not as deliberate as Grant, but I do write them and cover them a lot. Unfortunately, that keeps me up at night because I'm constantly thinking about what I could do different. And I'm sort of stuck in that mode where I'm constantly thinking about it. I would say the first thing and the hardest thing is, and you can get this in Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it's really affected me. And that is, if you have a goal to do something that's out of the box, you really have to be married to the right person. I would stress that if you're married to the wrong person who's not allowing you the freedom to really, like my wife has been, when I married her, I told her it's 50 or 500. I used to say to her, it's either 50,000 or 500,000 a year I'm going to make. I don't know what it's going to be. You got to live with both. She's rode a roller coaster with me and never complained one day. And she's just, you have to be married to that person, or you then have to worry about that and you can't go to do your thing, right? And they don't have to be like a rubber stamp, but they need to understand your DNA. And if they I always tell people, my friends, I say a woman marries a man hoping everything will change, and a man marries a woman hoping nothing will change, right? In the beginning, the sex is great, all those things are great, and you don't want that to change if you're a guy. And a woman wants the guy to calm down, maybe not go out with his friends as much, less golfing, less hunting, whatever your gig is.
By the way, that shit ain't happening, less golf. Not for me.
And so for me, the first wife, she jettisoned me. She said, after 12 years, she's like, you have houses and cars and making money and nothing's ever good enough. When are you done? I said, never. I'm never done. Well, that was it. She kicked me to the curb, right? The second wife, I told her, it'll never be done. You got to accept that. And if you can communicate that, I went to counseling with her before I married her. I've been going to counseling for 19 years since my first divorce. And so I'm really a believer that you got to be married to the right person, or don't be married.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because women, if I'm talking about the male side, they got to have what they want. You got to have what you want. And if it doesn't mesh, then it's a disaster for guys. I don't know how guys can handle it. I know guys that are getting divorced and have separate kids, and it drove me crazy.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate. And, one of the things that growing up as a kid, seeing my parents go through what they went through, I always, and I said this advice on several podcasts, but if I'm having any issues with my wife or any conflicts, or I think she's acting nuts, I always look at myself.
Yeah.
And generally I look in the mirror and I figure out, what am I doing to cause her to do that? Because she's an angel. And I play this thing in my head, and I do take that 100% responsibility on me, and it
Sure.
fixes it most of the time. Like,
Sure.
and that's my piece of advice for people. Like I said, I'm going on 17 years of marriage right now. And listen, I'm not easy to put up with. I can tell you that right now, because I'm an animal. I'm crazy. I'm fired up all the time. Yeah, it's usually me that's causing it. So, but that's great advice, Todd. I love it, man. And then, so another thing I was going to ask you, when
you asked a question about, I said marriage. I'll tell you, the other thing is that you really have to know what you want to do. I mean, you got to know what that is. You just can't say, I want to be rich. I mean, I get paid very well to do what I do, and hopefully I have a couple landings here and there with big upside, but I love doing what I'm doing. I love deals. I love activism. I'm restarting my hedge fund after 12 years, actually next month. And I love employing people and giving people the opportunity to be successful. I love watching people do better and better and better.
Me too.
I love that. So
yeah, that's what I get up for every morning. I talk about this all the time too. I feel like I'm in the people building business. Like you have hedge funds, you have your holding company. I'm in the mortgage business, and I'm starting this movement, all this, but really I wake up every morning to see what I can do better for people or help them reach a different level, even in their family life. Like we talk about in our company, and you may not do this at your company, but we talk about in our company, if somebody's having some issues at home or this and that, I counsel them. Hey, this is how I'd handle it. This is how I handled it at my house. Because sometimes they need to come into your office and sit down on the couch. It's just the way it is. And
but your business being in the mortgage business, I could envision, and what I would like about that business is I'd love to take a mortgage guy who has to go out there and prospect and help get them to prospect better and close deals and help people and watch them grow and grow and grow and grow, right?
Yep.
And that part would be, if I were running your business, that would be the part that would excite me.
Yeah, there's some good things going on with that. And, we always look at their money problems are our problems, their family problems are our problems, their health, physical. So there's one kid that I almost fired because I heard he was going out for interviews for a salary position. And I sat him down on the couch, and I was going to fire him, like, cause I don't, if somebody's not committed to our group, I'm like, listen, you're not committed. Let's go. So I sat him down and I had a talk with him. And right before I started to talk, I said, you know what, this kid's like 26. I'm thinking he's my age. He's been through the same things I've been through. He might need a talking to here. Let me test this kid out. So I went through it with him and I said, listen, do you want to be here? And he said, actually, I was just looking at salary just for something more consistent, but I changed my mind. My pipeline's rolling now. I said, listen, I was going to fire you, but what I want you to do right now is I want you to go across the street to the gym. You're going to sign up for a membership. I'm going to pay for your membership. You're going to get you, because he wasn't eating right. He was just not putting himself to what he needed to do. And I believe you need to take care of yourself. So that's the physical part. So I said, Andrew, you're going to go over there. You're going to sign up with me. You're going to work out with me. You're going to meet me at the gym every single day. He said, all right, I'm there. The other thing you're going to do is everything I tell you to do is regarding prospecting, accountability. You're going to stick to everything to a T. And if you don't, you're going to have to go work at that salary job. And he committed. And then he lost 25 pounds in 6 weeks. And his pipeline jumped up. He was making more money than he ever did. And he won Rookie of the Year for our company. And that's what I get up for in the morning, man.
I should come join you to work out. That's what I need. I went on keto and lost 65 pounds. I went off keto and gained 20 of it back.
Yeah. That's what I've done. I tried that before. Generally, you know what I do, man? I just get some ground turkey. So easy. Some rice or sweet potatoes or something and a green vegetable. And I stick with that like religiously throughout the day with a protein shake. And then I don't even think about taste. I just eat for fuel, and I think that in my mind, and it works. Cause I got up to, man, I'm only 5'6". I got up to 245 at one point.
Wow.
And, now I'm right at 200. So yeah, it works. But what kind of hobbies do you have, Todd? Besides,
hey, you know who I was just with? Speaking of food, I was just with Marshall. You know Marshall?
Yeah.
I like that guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just had lunch with him before I got to see you.
Oh, really? Yeah, I see him on Instagram all the time, but I've never met him in person. So.
Oh, you didn't see him at any of the conferences?
No, I haven't seen him in person. I just saw him there. And then will he be out at the Growth Con?
He said he was good. Yeah, he said he got a diamond, so he's going to be out there.
Okay. I'll introduce myself to him then. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
he knows who you are for sure. He runs he's in the real estate space too. He's buying, he does kind of what Grant does and I do a little bit. He's buying multifamily apartment buildings.
Right.
I like
Gotcha.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting him and you in person when we get out there. So besides work though, is work your hobby or do you have other hobbies?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Do I have hobbies? I would probably say work is my hobby. I do once in a blue moon golf, and it's not good.
Yeah.
I used to scuba dive about 100 pounds ago. Um, I'm really working on. I know it's insane, but we have this deal with the University of South Florida for an Alzheimer's treatment and an Alzheimer's vaccine. And my father has Alzheimer's. My mother-in-law died from it. My grandparents died from it. Their parents died from it. My father's brothers and sisters have it. And so I'm really transfixed on the idea that we're going to be an outlier and bring a treatment or some sort of treatment for Alzheimer's. People are failing at it at a big rate. And people don't know this, but there's about 20 years of science at universities that never gets brought to market. I hear people all the time say to me, well, if it's such a great deal, why didn't a big pharma company buy it? Because they don't ever take the risk until someone else does it, and they'll pay up for it once you can prove it. And that's what happened with the treatment for hepatitis C with Harvoni. Gilead paid $11 billion for that. They could have bought it years before that for practically nothing. So I'm spending my time trying to figure out what we're going to do for Alzheimer's. You know, I'm really focused on what we're going to do in that space.
And what is your projected time to be able to bring it to market, do you think?
So we believe, we got a letter from the FDA. We believe both drugs will be in patients this year. And we believe that one of them will be fast-tracked, which is a lithium-based co-crystal compound. So I think we're hoping by 2022 it'll be available. You know, you can never tell with biotech because you got to go through the FDA. It's got to be in humans. But one of our compounds, all 4 elements are already been in humans and approved. We have them as a composition of matter together. There's a co-crystal delivery, which makes it a small molecule where we can get this lithium salicylate to the brain easier. Whereas right now, when you have lithium, you got to take a blood test. It's very difficult. Lithium's a great treatment for psychiatric stuff, but it's toxic to the body. We believe our lithium is not toxic. And lithium is a tau blocker. And in preclinicals, it's doing amazing stuff with Alzheimer's. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to do something in the Alzheimer's space. And I think people think it's crazy that, hey, who is this non-scientist guy?
Right.
But,
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you know, like, how do you know so much about it just from talking to the professionals? And
so I've invested in a lot of biotech in my lifetime. I've done a lot of studying. And after 2008, I was sitting watching TV with then my 15-year-old daughter. And I saw this guy, Dr. Chow, on Sanjay Gupta on CNN. And Patient Safety, a company I had founded, had sold for $120 million to Stryker. And since I had founded it, you know, I had a lot of credibility in identifying this medical technology company that sold. And I bought it for $3.5 million. It sold for 120. And you know, there are a lot of steps along the way. It took a lot more money and took 9 years, but it did happen. I called the guy up on the phone and I said to him, I told my daughter, I said, you know, if I'm going to go back to Wall Street, I'm going to do something that matters. I think I'm going to try to help people with Alzheimer's. She said, okay, Daddy, you should do that. You know, she's a sweet girl and encouraged me. And I called the guy on the phone and said, you know, it looks like you have something for Alzheimer's. You know, what are you doing with it? He says, we don't have the money to bring it to market. And I said, if I could get the money, could I get a license? And he said, yes. And I got on a plane. Steve Caspi, a pretty famous real estate developer in New York City, gave me $80,000 to do the legal and to get a license. And I raised $4 million, got a license. And then
now wait a minute. When you said you raised $4 million, that's you calling around to people that have investors?
Yeah,
and they're looking for returns, or they're just donating to the cause?
No. They're shareholders.
Right. Okay. Yep.
And I raised a round of financing at like 20 cents a share, and then another one at $1.50, and now we're doing one, I think it's $7.50. I think that's the plan, and we're hoping to bring it public later this year. And we raised a lot of money to get these 2 drugs, and we brought on a CEO that used to work at Novartis. We just got some board members, one from Novartis, one from used to be on the New Jersey State Pension Plan. And we're just building a team of doctors around it, scientists from Langone and Washington University. And how do I know a lot about it? I just read.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Hey, so listen, one thing I want to, as you're going through all this stuff, and I'm gonna end on this question here. When you have a rough day or you feel like you're getting into a rut, or not just one day, but it's like a stretch, what's your go-to, or what do you do to get out of a rut?
I usually try to spend time with my wife in the evening to try to mellow out. I watch a lot of shows, I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of, I'll listen to 10X by Grant Cardone, or I'll replay something from Sell or Be Sold. He has a very good message, so I like his message a lot. Believe it or not, I was kind of down last night a little bit. I'm struggling, tired. I actually listened to a couple of your podcasts last night.
I appreciate that.
So I try to find people who don't do what I do, but speak and try to live that sort of get positive lifestyle. So I try to surround myself with people and some of them I know personally. I've known Grant for a while. I've been following Gary Vee for a long time. Omar the rock star. I try to surround myself with people who I can just get some of their stuff and listen to it and get a different perspective.
Yep.
And then if I want to really get positive, I just go see my father, who can't remember my name.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
you don't have problems when you think you have problems. All you have to do is go find someone who can't remember things. It's a devastating disease.
Yeah, man. I hit home. Whew. Yeah.
Yeah. So I go see him and he's happy, and I ask him if he knows my name, and he kind of tries to remember, and then I remind him, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I know who you are." And then you realize you don't have that problems that are that serious.
Yeah, because we get into our little bubbles, right?
Yeah.
And different size bubbles, little big ones, it doesn't matter, but you're in your bubble. And like that, Grant does that for me too. I'll come home, I'll pop on the YouTube and I'll watch him, and I'm like, this mortgage stuff it's not shit, man. We got this, Yeah. I love it, man.
You gotta constantly be like, you go out, you said you go work out, you gotta physically train. You gotta train yourself to be in business. You gotta physically train yourself all the time, and so I try to get around people that want to do the same thing, whether they want to be on Cardone U or they want to be on some other person's training platform. I read a lot of books. I probably read, I don't know how many I read. My wife says it's insanity. I probably go through 100 a year.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly either reading or listening constantly. And so I'll kind of binge somebody. Like I started on you last night with this girl who was pregnant at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I just try to go through other people's stories and figure out. And a lot of times I'll get an idea from somebody else. It's like, it's
so awesome, isn't it?
It'll happen to me.
I just try to, I grab one thing. It's a weird thing, man. And,
sure.
And I don't try to absorb the whole thing, because you can't absorb the whole podcast. All the messages might be in it, but that one little thing that can help you through. I'll take a lot of things from podcasts and bring them to my sales meeting the next day.
Right.
And I don't pretend it's mine, but I'll share with where I got it. And it's effective, man. It really, it's a great tool.
I've done some, I'm sure I don't know if you've seen me. I do my own podcast too.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, I can see you're very positive. You do a good job at podcasts. If you can continue to do that and you get different perspectives, then that content's worth listening to and pulling something out of it that works for you, right? Yep.
It's a library. Like I have my own library now, and I encourage my team to watch the library, because I'm bringing this to the Nations Lending. I do it's called Dialed In for Nations, Dialed In mastermind call once a week with the whole company, and I'll host and I'll bring different producers on, and then I'll interview them for the whole company. But then I told the whole company, I'm doing this What Are You Made Of podcast, not for me. I'm doing it for all of you guys, because the people that are on these shows, you get content from to help you with your life.
Sure.
Todd, I didn't share this with everyone yet, but I'm working on a company right now that's called People Building Inc. I believe we're in the people building business, right? Like I mentioned before. And I think that Grant's Cardone handles finance, sales, some business, some management. But I think people building intrigues me because you got all that there with Cardone. You got leadership training, you got communication training, you got relationship training. And if you could bring that, among other things, all into one company and so many different options and products to be able to sell with that. That's the mission I'm on right now. And
it doesn't matter whether you're religious or not, but there's a book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And when you talk about relationships and what your People Inc. concept, that book, which explains the difference between romantic love and actual love, was really, really powerful. And I meet a lot of people who don't get that part. They think that girl's really pretty, she's really sexy, I'm in love with her. You know, they don't realize that that's romantic love. It's love is far different. That love is only one thing, right? It's only time, right? That's really what love is, giving someone your time. And more people need to be taught it. I wish you well with that. If anything I can do to help you, I'd love it.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
I'm a big believer. I believe it or not, every Saturday morning at 7:00. You could literally, if someone wanted to shoot me, you'd know where I'd be. I get up at 6:50 every morning on Saturday morning, and I drive all the way to Beverly Hills. I see the same shrink I've been seeing for 19 years from 8 to 9, and I have breakfast with one of my best friends up there. And going to see a therapist or working on personal behavior, People Inc., as you talk about, it's a huge part of what we do. It's learning sales is one thing, but being able to communicate and have good relationships with your family is probably the most important thing.
Absolutely, man. Well, listen, I'm going to be coming out to California because we're working on growing our business in LA area. So I'm going to be coming out, and I'll let you know when I'm on my way out there so we can connect, maybe I'll go to your shrink with you and listen. I'm just kidding. But
yeah, you got to come out.
Yeah.
My company owns a couple of restaurants, like 4 in San Diego and 1 in Los Angeles. But as you can see, I don't miss a meal. So I have a lot of great places I can take you.
I love to eat too, man. I love to eat too. Well, hey, Todd, listen, thank you so much for coming on the What Are You Made Of podcast. I appreciate you, brother. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in Vegas next week. And we're going to have a good time. So,
hey, let me know when this comes out. I'll promote it.
Okay. I will do. Hey, and you guys have been listening to the What Are You Made Of podcast with Mike C-Roc. And I'm so thankful for all the support of all the listeners, all the feedback. You guys are great. And I'm just here to help you guys. And I hope you can feel that. So thanks again to our sponsor, Nations Lending. And please go subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and follow me on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that at Mike C-Roc Ciorrocco. Until next time, it's your boy C-Roc. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of the What Are You Made Of podcast. So that you don't miss future episodes, please rate and subscribe to the What Are You Made Of podcast on your favorite listening or viewing apps, and follow me on your favorite social media platforms. I would love to hear your stories of past experiences and engage with you further.